We talk about seafood a lot because I'm a seafood junkie, and one of the things that actually drove me into the restaurant industry was understanding people need to eat more seafood and more of the right types of seafood. The thing about the new dietary guidelines I know you focused on, which was really huge for me, was getting people to eat more seafood because our seafood consumption is so low.
Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS Secretary. Welcome to The Real Food Show. Thanks to President Trump, we flipped the food pyramid and put real food back where it belongs, at the center of the American plate. I'm traveling across America, connecting with renowned chefs to show families how to cook delicious, nutritious meals with real ingredients, all at affordable prices. America, it's time to eat real food. Let's get cooking. Hi, I'm Robert F. Kennedy Jr., your HHS Secretary, and we're here for the first episode of The Real Food Show. And I'm here today with Chef Andrew Gruel at his home in Huntington Beach, this beautiful kitchen. And he's going to show us how to cook wild Alaskan salmon at an affordable price. So the servings of each of these, we asked to keep it under $5. And one of the things that we're going to do is talk about the dietary guidelines during the course of the show and how you can eat the highest quality food in this country at a very, very affordable price. Oh, Andrew, what are we going to do today?
Okay, well, this is about taking ingredients that everybody already knows. It's approachable. You can get them at any store, and maybe manipulating them a little bit with a couple chef tricks, but nothing overly intellectual, so that we can get that flavor that's memorable, it's sticky, it's addictive. What I found as a chef is that people are so obsessed and addicted to processed food because it's chemically built to be addictive. But with a few simple ingredients that are fresh and whole and real, we'll be able to fulfill that same effect utilizing one of our bounty items in America, which is our seafood. I talk about this often. So we've actually got right here these are our wild Alaskan sockeye salmon fillets. Now, these were frozen. I'm an advocate of actually using frozen seafood because the way in which they flash freeze seafood now on the boats in modern technology, it's better than fresh in some cases, right? 95% of all seafood that's used for sushi in the United States is frozen. So if you think about sushi being the freshest and it's frozen, that freezing kills the parasites, it's a good thing. But more importantly, it's cheaper when you buy it frozen. In addition, you can even buy this in the can, or you don't even have to use salmon. You can use any other seafood. You can use shrimp, sablefish, black cod. I mean, any other type of American caught seafood, and you're still going to be able to utilize this recipe. So I start off.
And if you get it in the can, it's actually going to be cheaper than $5.
Yeah, much cheaper. Yeah, much cheaper. And nowadays, you've got a diversity of seafood that you can get in a can, from sardines, even abalone, right? They're starting to farm abalone in a responsible manner. So you could use abalone if you wanted to in this recipe. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just lightly, and this is where people get confused when they're cooking seafood, is they get, what do I do, right? I'm so scared of seafood, it's going to stick. If you're a beginner, right, and you're just kind of in that elementary level cooking seafood, just start off with a roasting pan, right? Start off with a roasting pan and a good extra virgin olive oil, or you can even use a beef tallow or an avocado oil. It's neutral, and it's not full of all those seed oils. And all we're going to do is just hit it with a little bit of sea salt, and we're going to hit it on both sides with this fat, and we're going to throw this into a 400-degree oven just to gently cook the seafood. As I step through this recipe, I want to show you a few tricks and show the viewers some tricks that these are ways in which you introduce flavors, addictive flavors, into your food without increasing either the cost or adding chemicals. So fresh herbs are key for me. So I'm always going to be using fresh herbs at every step of the way when I'm cooking it. In this case, I'll just throw some thyme on there because that'll perfume it as we stick it in the oven. And then that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to throw this into a 400-degree oven, and we're going to cook it until it's fully cooked, about 8 minutes. And from there, we're going to then flake it up and we're going to put it together. So with the salmon we cooked, and now we've got one here that's already been cooked and cooled. So that's all you're going to do is you're going to cook it and you're going to cool it. Now, we talk about seafood a lot because I'm a seafood junkie, and one of the things that actually drove me into the restaurant industry was understanding people need to eat more seafood and more of the right types of seafood. The thing about the new dietary guidelines I know you focused on, which was really huge for me, was getting people to eat more seafood because our seafood consumption is so low. We have this omega-3 deficiency, DHAs, selenium, zinc, iron, all of the necessary vitamins that would be in seafood are not in our diets because our per capita consumption is 18, 19 pounds per person. Alternatively, Japan is 50, 51 pounds per person, and they have no metabolic disease, some of the longest health span, etc. So, what are your thoughts in regards to the ways in which we get seafood in our diet, or why there's such a deficiency?
I think it's cultural because we have a lot of seafood in this country. We're used to eating meat and think of that as our protein. Today, we have the lowest level of cattle herds in history in at least 100 years. The cost of meat has gone up. We're doing everything that we can in the administration to bring that down and increase the size of the herd. But until that happens, this is a fantastic option. And as you say, this has the omega-3. It has many of the vitamins and nutrients that are not available in meat.
Yes. So while we're cooking it, all I'm going to do is I'm going to dump this salmon in a bowl here. If you want to break that up with a spoon, what I'll start to do is I'll start to add the other ingredients to these cakes. Now, don't worry if you overcook this. That's the key here is that it can be overcooked, right? Even if it's undercooked, we're going to sear it in a pan anyways. All I'm going to do is create a binder here. As you mix that up, I'm going to do 1 egg, okay? I'm going to add a little bit of panko breadcrumb, which is really just lightened breadcrumb, and that's going to kind of pull everything together. Now for the flavor element, I'm going to add some Dijon mustard. Let's go with some a little bit of red onion, some fresh chives, right? So you'll get 2 different onion or vegetal flavors from the onion. And another element that people don't necessarily talk much about is nutritional yeast. This is actually very good for you, and it adds a ton of umami and richness without having to add things like cheese or any of those other fattier ingredients that might overpower the flavor of the salmon. And then I'm just
great for your microbiome.
Wonderful for the microbiome. I'm also going to add just a little bit of avocado oil mayo right here, and that's going to pull it together. So we can kind of pull that in together, and then we'll make the cakes. Now, what people always ask me is, well, seafood is too expensive. Now, I trade in seafood, and the American wild seafood, we have the most sustainable fisheries in the world. I mean, legislatively, by virtue of the Magnuson-Stephenson Act of '76, I think it was. All of our fisheries have to be sustainable.
By Senator Ted Kennedy.
All of our fisheries have to be sustainable, and yet we import 80+% of our seafood. We export our bounty of seafood. And of the 80% that we import, 60+% is farmed overseas because we don't have an open ocean aquaculture policy here. So I wonder if that has a lot to do with kind of the price differential with the trade imbalance, but furthermore, how we can promote and get people to eat more of the right types of U.S. wild, and some of it's farmed or fortified, stock fortified here in the United States.
Yeah, you were talking about the food pyramid. When I came into office, a week after I got in, I got handed the Dietary Guidelines that had been worked upon for 4 years by the Biden administration. They were 453 pages long, and they were written by food industry lobbyists. And they reflected the same kind of mercantile impulses that had put Fruit Loops at the top of the food pyramid. And we threw those guidelines out, and we brought the best nutritionists in the country, the top universities in America together for a year. We locked them in a room for 11 months, and we said, come up with dietary guidelines that are actually science-based. And there'd been a war on saturated fats for almost 70 years. The government had been lying to us and telling us that protein caused heart attacks. There was no science that supported that. And one of the things we found when we started looking at the real science was that when you don't eat protein, you eat something else. And it was ultra-processed foods. And most people chose. So 70% of the calories that our children were eating were ultra-processed food. And it's no wonder that we had a metabolic crisis. And, our diabetes rate had gone from 0 in children to about 38% diabetic or pre-diabetic. And we had the sickest country in the world. And we got to get people eating protein again, because when you eat protein, you don't eat the other stuff.
Secretary Kennedy, I'll tell you a crazy story. So I grew up in that world. All I ate was cereal, pasta, refined carbs, etc. I went to a small college and suffered having horrible stomach issues. And I actually ended up dropping out of college and got into the restaurant industry because it was the only place I had a safe haven because my stomach issues were so bad. It wasn't until 2014 when I completely cut seed oils out of my diet and all of the processed foods that I actually healed my entire body strictly with diet. That's after they tried to prescribe me antidepressants, claiming that it was the neurotransmitters in my intestines. They tried to give me anti-anxiety medication, and it wasn't until I changed my diet, ironically, after becoming a chef, that it all got healed.
At least it made you happy, right?
Well, yeah. Well, being it drove me into the kitchen, which was the best thing in the world. So speaking of, I've got, so now I've done some of these cakes ahead of time because you want those to sit and you want them to actually absorb some of that binder. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm just gonna take these cakes and I'm just gonna kind of cake them up into a ball, and you see how it comes together. And you can form them however you want, and then just really kind of dust them in this panko to give it a crispy exterior, because we eat, obviously texture is so important, right? And those are the things, you don't pay for these tips, right? You don't have to pay extra for texture. This is just breadcrumbs. You can make your own at home. So I'm gonna put some of this on the exterior, and then we're just going to cook these in a carbon steel pan until they are heated all the way through about 155, 160 degrees. You can cook them in the oven or on the stovetop. But we're not done yet. We're gonna make a quick simple vinaigrette and an arugula and green apple salad to go along with this. So another area in which people can actually save money and eat better, and I talk about this, I impress this upon everybody, even my customers, I'm losing business doing this, is that vinaigrettes, dressings, condiments, that's what I grew up with. As I mentioned, my two working parents, you know, microwave generation, everything was just condiments in the refrigerator and then takeout and fast food. And I realized that not only was I addicted to salad dressings and condiments, but I was becoming addicted to the seed oils. So the first thing I do when I teach kids, our kids, other kids, and even adults who are entering the kitchen to cook is how simple it is to make a fresh vinaigrette. So we're gonna do that right here. And really a vinaigrette is just an emulsion, the coming together of two ingredients that otherwise wouldn't come together. In this case, we're gonna use extra virgin olive oil and some cider vinegar. I really like the cider vinegar just because it gives it that nice sharp bite. It's inexpensive and it's also pretty good for you. So I'm gonna add that here. We do a ratio, right? So we do one part cider vinegar to really 3 parts oil. Add some fresh herbs in here, even maybe add some nutritional yeast. Oh, and I added the Dijon mustard because not only, you know, one of the things I tell people is when you're cooking, right, they over-intellectualize it. Think about your palate. Salty, sour, sweet, and bitter. Dijon fulfills the bitterness. We get a natural sweetness from the cider vinegar. You get the fattiness from the extra virgin olive oil. We'll add a little bit of salt to this, and the sweetness can come from as well from the vinegar. And if you wanted, you could add some honey to this. But it's a 3-to-1. It's not a set recipe. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add this extra virgin olive oil here, 3-to-1. If you want it more acidic, you can add, you know, make it more of a 2-to-1, if you will. And this, the cost on this, right now, if you went and bought a bottle of salad dressing, it's gonna be about $9 to $11. The cost on this is less than $5. And it's this easy, ready? We just mix it up, let that Dijon mustard, which as I mentioned is a natural emulsifier, let it do its work. Let those herbs kind of perfume into the vinaigrette. And right here we've got a healthy vinaigrette, no seed oils, with extra virgin olive oil and a little bit of cider vinegar. And voila, we're done. And I'll leave this in the fridge for, you know, a week or two. It's got pretty good shelf life. But for the purposes of our salad here, we're just gonna toss up a little wild arugula. Making a salad is really one of the simplest things in the world, but you could charge $23 for this at a fine restaurant and a nice plate. But when you do it at home, it's incredibly inexpensive and healthier for you. I'm gonna add some fresh cracked pepper here. And another trick, too many times people throw away the lemon after they squeeze the lemon juice in there, but the exterior of the lemon is full of essential oils, flavor, perfumes, hitting your salad with a little bit of the zest does the trick. And then we'll add, you know, one of the things, especially with me having stomach issues, is, you know, kind of trying to get more prebiotics, more fiber into my diet. And I learned early on that the beans are essential, especially with the breakdown and being, you know, an essential protein / fiber. So I'm gonna throw some white beans into this salad as well, and they're relatively inexpensive. If you wanna give that a toss, I'm gonna pull a spoon here. You can toss it up with a spoon. There you go.
Well, tell us how you sharpen the knife.
So I'm honing the knife right now, and this is really essential, is to keep a sharp knife, because the best tool in the kitchen is a sharp knife. Actually, the most dangerous tool in the kitchen is a dull knife, and it kind of seems counterintuitive, but if you don't have a sharp knife, then you're gonna slide off of whatever you're cutting and typically lose a finger, which is, you know, how I lost this one. But this is also fun. This is what my kids love doing, right? So you always use this honing steel, and then you go about 45 degrees and go away from your body, right? teach your kids how to do this, and you'll be able to cook faster, quicker. We're talking through this right now, but realistically on a weeknight, this is a 10, 12-minute meal. Our cakes are already done. They've just been slowly cooking on the back burner over here because time is money. Now for the last piece, I'm gonna add just some matchstick green apples. To me, apples are, you know, as iconic as apple pie, obviously, but one of the most important produce items that you can find at the grocery store, especially United States apples. But there are so many different varieties, they're so healthy, and they're so inexpensive. So I always like to include them into my salads or all the different dishes. This is how I get my kids to eat. I mean, we got 4 kids, they're in the kitchen all the time. And one thing I've learned with getting kids to eat, especially outside of, you know, just biting an apple, is if the kids cook it themselves, they'll eat it. So that's always the joke. Like my son, you know, he hates mushrooms. So one day I got one of those salad knives and had him cut the mushrooms up. Because he cut them and he cooked them, he ate the mushrooms. So nowadays I just have the kids cooking it.
That is a good trick.
Cooking everything, yeah. Perfect. So a little white bean, green apple, wild arugula, that bitterness, kind of peppery. And those are the greens, right? The healthfulness from the greens that typically people aren't consuming day in and day out. The white beans, these are canned white beans. I just rinsed them off to get some of that excess sodium off, organic white beans. The arugula has already been cleaned. The green apple was a quick slice. That's something I would let my kids do normally to get their knife skills going. You know, we've got restaurants and labor cost is high, so I keep having more kids so we have free labor.
Yeah, good plan.
I've also learned in California, kids can't sue you, so that's helpful. No, I'm just and look, we've got the egg. You know, if you look at the expanse of all these different ingredients, and I think about it in regards to the new dietary guidelines, you know, for me that was huge because I've been a chef who's been banging my head up against the wall for 10, 15 years, especially on the seafood side of things, telling people, get rid of that imbalance between 6s and 3s, right? You got to eat more 3s and you got to decrease your 6s as well so that we can get back to that normalized ratio. And it wasn't really until you brought attention to it, and now ultimately through this dietary guidelines, that people say, oh, okay, it's credible. And we're teaching them how to get back into their own kitchen because it all starts right here. And this is fun food, right? This is delicious food. We can even plate it up right now, and the viewers can see. You know, make sure I get a bunch of the beans in here. And the green apple, you know, people think apple's sweet. Interestingly, apple is actually tart. So when you're composing dishes with food, especially rich food like salmon that have all those natural inherent fats, right? Those omega-3s, the DHAs, you always want to think about having something tart or acidic to cut through that richness, because otherwise the food could taste a little overwhelming. And when people say to me, oh, it tasted rich and fishy, I always think to myself, maybe you didn't have the right balance of ingredients. And these cakes just cooked simply right here. We're gonna just kind of put those off to the side. All right, real simple. And if you wanted to make a dressing or use a little bit of the extra dressing right onto the, there we go. You used a good amount. We did the perfect amount, so. And then just a little squeeze of fresh citrus over at the end. And then just some fresh chives at the end. And there we go. It's that simple.
Beautiful.
So this right here, this dish cost about $5, and we're using wild Alaskan sockeye salmon. If you wanted to use canned salmon or even an alternative protein or seafood source, you can get it all the way down to $2.50, $3 a portion. That includes the salad, the white beans, the special vinaigrette, and all the ingredients that go inside the salmon cake. You're gonna be eating the quality of fine dining, but at the cost and convenience of the new dietary guidelines, which is not that expensive.
All right. Amazing.
Thank you. First time I've cooked for a dignitary.
Thank you, Chef Andrew Gruel. We're here today to teach Americans how to eat real food, high quality food at affordable prices, and we'll see you next time.
Produced by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.